So a few days ago, Assassin's Creed Shadow had been under the microscope. It was kind of the linchpin to maybe change the future of Ubisoft. Why? Well, because Ubisoft has been heading downhill for the last 10 years. With a push for the message over gameplay and better storytelling, people are getting tired of Ubisoft's antics. So it was sort of up to Assassin's Creed Shadows on actually bringing Ubisoft back. But it seems that no matter how well Shadows performed, Ubisoft had a much bigger issue on its hands. A company bloated with inefficiencies, struggling with revenue and sitting on a goldmine of an IP that it just couldn't fully leverage. Many people have thought that some sort of corporate restructure was coming, and now, well, now it is official. Ubisoft has just announced the creation of a brand new subsidiary, a totally separate legal entity valued at, okay, you're ready to be shocked, 4 billion euros. That's about 4.3 billion US dollars. So how can that happen? How can a company that's already on the downfall, that's been at the brink of destruction for the last half decade, be remade and then valued at 4 billion euros? Well, have you heard of Tencent? Yeah, they've been around for quite some time, sucking up every company under the sun, like some sort of Chinese vampire megacorp. They're investing 1.16 billion of their own money for a 25% stake in the new company. Of course, Ubisoft keeping the other 75%. Now, this isn't just some sort of spin-off. It's sort of a full-on carve-out of Ubisoft's most valuable assets. Think of it as really taking the company, destroying it, and then rebuilding it from the bits that could make a profit. These parts are Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, and Rainbow Six. At least that's what we know so far. The entire teams that worked on those franchises, from Montreal to Quebec, Sherbrooke to Barcelona, have been moved under this new umbrella. So this new company now owns the operations, teams, and content of these three mega franchises. I mean, Ubisoft technically still owns the IP, but they've handed over a perpetual, exclusive, and worldwide license to this new entity. In exchange, the new entity pays Ubisoft royalties. Think of it as Ubisoft now licensing its own content to kind of itself, or more factually, the people with the money. Why have they done this? Well, Ubisoft need money, and it needs the freedom in order to be creative again. The parent company have struggled. Their stock has been way down for a long time, more than 30% over the last year. Their market cap dropped to 1.7 billion euros. That's less than the valuation of the new company that they've just created. The reality is, Ubisoft hasn't been able to deliver constant hits. Skull and Bones was delayed for over 6 years. X-Defiant failed to even take off. Even when games do launch, they aren't hitting the marks that they used to. Ubisoft's 19,000 employee footprint has become unsustainable, with massive wages bloated beyond any sort of income they could hope to gain. So this is what they've done to fix it. They've pulled their cards off the table, put them in a new deck, and then invited investors in order to make them more valuable. Like, well, Tencent. They're kind of a great company to bet on, despite their reputation of being a bit of a villain. The new company is supposed to be leaner, cleaner, they've trimmed all the fat, and operationally independent from what's come before. They've got their own leadership, board of directors, and they don't need to wait for orders of Ubisoft HQ. They can move faster, spend more flexibly, and focus more exclusively on these three franchises and try and build them back up. You see, even Rainbow Six, Far Cry, and Assassin's Creed, the most profitable franchises, have been stripped in the last half decade and are nowhere nearly as profitable as they once were. So, the question is, why is this the way that the restructures happened? Why hasn't a company like Tencent just outright bought Ubisoft? I mean, they definitely have the money, and it's not stopped them from doing things in the past. Well, they literally can't. Back in 2022, Tencent took a 49.9% stake in Guillemot Brothers Limited, a family holding that controls Ubisoft himself. But as part of the deal, they agreed not to buy more than 10% of Ubisoft shares unless the Guillemot family gave them the green light. And surprise, surprise, it was denied this time. They've always wanted to retain more control, so Tencent has been stuck, wanting to invest more but being blocked from increasing their stake in the parent company. This workaround kind of solves it. Tencent now owns 25% of the new subsidiary and gets deeper access to Assassin's Creed and the machine that comes with it, without actually touching Ubisoft's main shareholding structure. So sure, maybe smart business on their part, and it could actually be a fresh start for game franchises that have been left long ago. Tencent's not just giving Ubisoft more money for fun though. They've built in plenty of protections for themselves. There's a 5-year lockup, meaning that they can't sell their shares unless Ubisoft loses majority control of the new company. There's also veto rights, which mean that if Ubisoft want to sell part of the new entity's assets, Tencent themselves have to approve. There's put and call options. If they change control of Ubisoft, Tencent can force a sale, or Ubisoft can buy back Tencent stakes, and minimum price guarantees, meaning that, Tencent won't get burned if this new company loses value like, well, Ubisoft stock did after their last investment. All of this kind of protects the money that Tencent are putting into it, and Ubisoft get to say, hey, we'll raise over €1 billion without giving you more control. So let's actually move back into the gaming space and what this means for Assassin's Creed, as that's the most relevant franchise here. You might be thinking, didn't Assassin's Creed kind of do well? Well, sure. Ubisoft themselves said it had over 3 million players and achieved the second highest day one revenue in the game series, but they didn't release actual sales figures, which is a red flag. They also told the media not to compare Shadows to Valhalla because, well, Valhalla launched during COVID, when more people were home, and Shadows has dealt with review bombing on some platforms. To me, this feels a little bit like a cop-out. Shadows was never going to be their best-selling game, even though it needed to be. The press around the build-up was just so negative. I saw zero positive income in terms of YouTube comments and the general fiasco from the public. Sure, the Steam reviews are doing all right and the critic reviews are doing better, but that's not what makes them money. It's real people buying real copies of this game, and a big chunk of those 3 million players are probably coming from Ubisoft Plus, which doesn't earn Ubisoft any more money. Even if Shadows was a hit, one good launch does not erase years of mismanagement. I mean, just ask Warner Bros. Hogwarts Legacy made over $1 billion and they still had layoffs in the studio closures. Look, this was coming for a long time. Their stock has been dropping for ages. One good game wasn't going to save their ship. So I think this restructuring has been coming for years. But this is where a company that deserves its downfall actually has a darker twist to it, because there are real people and real employees behind this. If you're one of the studios working on Assassin's Creed, Far Cry or Rainbow Six, the likelihood is you're probably safe, or just being moved into the new entity. Still technically working for Ubisoft but under new leadership, and really not seeing too much of a change unless you really start to look up. But the people that are not, people working on unannounced projects or a lesser known IP, I don't know, like Skull and Bones, this is where things get uncertain. Even Ubisoft's internal memos that were leaked by Insider Gaming acknowledged that employees are nervous. The company says it's committed to transparency, but they don't have answers yet. So it may not be full-on layoffs, but I think it's probably going to head that way. It's such a big move and will mean one of two things. Ubisoft is either going to make a full recovery, at least be on the road to it, or this genuinely is the end of such a big game company. And really, it kind of has done that anyway. Whilst it's got the same name, a lot of the same employees and the same franchise, Ubisoft as we know it is done. It's over. It's been remade. Ubisoft 2, as some might call it. It was a bloated company anyway, very slow moving and trying to compete in a world dominated by fast, live-driven ecosystems. They were burning money and releasing very few hits. Now they've at least carved out a leaner, more independent company built on 3 of gaming's most iconic franchises, niching down to what actually does well. It's a risky move and disgustingly corporate, but it's probably the only thing that could and will save the company. So for us players, what does that mean? We're still going to get Assassin's Creed games. We'll still probably get that Black Flag remake. We'll get Far Cry games if anyone really still cares about that. And of course, Rainbow Six is still going to be chugging along as the absolute scummy powerhouse it's always been. But everything else at Ubisoft, consider it a bit of risk. I mean, the amount of games they've released recently, Star Wars Outlaws, the Avatar Pandora one, Skull and Bones, none of them have done well. And these are huge, or wanting to be huge franchises that flopped harder than your granddad down the stairs at 3 in the morning. I mean, Shadows was okay, but it was not even close to being enough to change Ubisoft's fate. Their structure, at least, might. But anyway, if you like this breakdown, please hit the subscribe button and let me down in the comments what you think this means for Ubisoft long term. But until then, I will see you in the next one.